This video is part 2 of the Sarissa Gladiator Amphitheatre build. In part 1, I constructed it and glued on some textures, decorative elements, and things of that nature. This video is going to detail my approach to painting it and applying some other details in the editor's box and things like that. All right, so throughout this video, I'd reference a few different paints that are out of production. Toffee brown, spice brown, Bambi brown, all by Delta Ceram Coat. So we're gonna have to come up with some equivalents to those. When I was looking for conversion charts, turns out a lot of the conversion charts also include out of production paints. So what I ended up with experimenting with is these here, honey brown and dark chocolate. And then between these two, you can get pretty close to the spice brown and toffee brown. And I also supplemented a little bit with desert sand. When I do the sand portion, I use toffee brown for that. That works well for single figures and like single figure bases and small bases and things like that. It didn't seem to work real well for the large hex grid. If I could redo it, I would paint a lighter sand value as the base coat and then dry brush on that. That way it won't take so long. Anyway, let's proceed. Now that everything is assembled, next step is to prime the MDF. Helps seal it up, and it also helps with paint adhesion and just kind of evens everything out, since we had put a little bit of filler on and there's sand and stuff like that. Anyway, I usually use this type of primer. It's a Duplicolor, the sandable. I usually kind of, depending on the project, I'll use black, white, gray, or the red, depending on kind of what the overall tone or color of the project is going to be. I use an airbrush and Vallejo primer for miniatures and smaller things. Terrain, typically I'm going to go with the spray can, and Duplicolor is the best type. I'm spraying outside, and it's a little bit windy out, so I'm in the garage. I would recommend not spraying when it's humid outside. So there are certain times of year, especially here in the Midwest United States, where don't even bother. It's going to affect the primer. When you kind of spray paint, get kind of tacky or cloudy or something like that. All right, at this point I've primed everything. I gave it a shot of gray Duplicolor automotive primer, then a little bit of the Rust Red automotive primer, and then just a little bit of white over the top. Gives a little texture. A bit like a visual texture. It doesn't usually give a actual texture. Although I do get some sputtering on the white. I think that'll be okay. First thing I'm gonna do is paint the base so I can test some overhead shots for the Blood on the Sands rulebook. For sand, I almost always start with toffee brown. It's a Delta Ceram Coat craft paint. All right, let's start the dry brushing process using old parchment, another discontinued paint. So what I like to do is have a paper towel and get most of the paint actually off of it, and then kind of randomize your movements as much as possible. Every different direction, especially at first, because you're liable to put down a big old blob of paint. And then make sure you go everywhere. It's better to take this kind of slow and careful, otherwise you're gonna regret your decisions. Looking a little dark right now. It'll get better though. Okay, dry brushing done. At this point, getting kind of a light layer of the old parchment. Last I'm going to tie it together a little bit more, one more layer of dry brushing. This will be an ivory color craft paint. Usually use craft paint on terrain. I don't want to use expensive Vallejo or GW or whatever. So this is just going to lightly graze over, pick up the grains of sand, even it out a little bit more. Applying it kind of randomly, going different directions, so I don't get any big blobs or weird directional marks or anything like that. After that, I think I'm going to have to go back and reline between the hexes. I'm going to get a fine point brush and some thin down light brown tan and go through just to accentuate them a little bit, make sure they're nice and visible. Just going to go in here with a cheap craft paint now to fill in the line work in between the hexes. I thought they would maybe show up more just from dry brushing, but the dry brushing had to be a little aggressive with it and it filled in some of the line work. So I'm just going to go in and carefully get in there. If you're pretty careful in the early stages when you're putting on the sand, this will be pretty easy. Again, using a light brown craft paint. As you build up the layers, you want to get more and more paint off of the brush, otherwise you're going to get blobby marks. And then I'm just going to reinforce that grain texture. Kind of meandering around so you don't get any spots you're focusing on, and I'm kind of rotating the brush sometimes too, just to pick up a little extra texture here and there. Just going to keep building it up. I'm going to go and do all the little railings, so I'll just kind of approach them the same way. Just kind of pick up edges. Kind of like that. And then just continue around the arena. Same technique. All right, for this next step, we're going to be using watercolor pencils for the paneling and line work in between planks and boards and lumber. This is a water-soluble pencil, so you're going to use it like a colored pencil. Just draw normally, and then it will break down once you apply water. and you can kind of treat it like a watercolor at that point. So I like using these for things that are very flat, and if you want to try and mimic or give the impression of some kind of paneling, this is pretty good for that. You can use these for marbling and other things as well. They're pretty handy. I'm going to mainly be using the black and then a little bit of this one, marmalade, maybe a couple other ones here and there. So there's a couple different brands of these too. All the major art supply manufacturers probably have a watercolor pencil version. So once you've done the dry brushing, you know, a couple of very light layers, a couple layers, just to kind of start to establish the hint of a grain, then you're going to want to come in and, let's see, I'm going to divide this into 5, I guess. So probably going to go with the width I have drawn out there. So I'm just going to draw a line across. Subdivide it. That a little bit off there. If you do make a mistake, that was a little too thick. If you do make a mistake, just use water. You can see it breaks that. Hopefully you can see. I don't know if you can see from. Anyway, hopefully you can see that it breaks that back down, and you can dab it back up again. So water is not going to pull up acrylic paint, but it will pull this up. So if you make a mistake, pretty handy. Try and even that one out a little bit more. That's better. Okay. So what we're going to do now is you can kind of reestablish these if you want, make them a little more prominent. They're not very prominent right now. Then a little water will kind of deepen them and diffuse them to some extent. So this is a really good way to do quick planks on something that's flat, like MDF. I've used this if I had to make if you wanted to make a raft for a scenario and didn't want to actually go to the trouble of building one with balsa or something like that, this would be a good way to do that. I've used it for pretty long planks for Rangers of Shadow Deep, I think, because you need some weird terrain for that game sometimes. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time and money on something that you are only going to use once. So if you want to, you can doll this up a little bit more with some acrylic paint. And what I'm going to do, just go along that seam here and there, not along the whole thing, maybe just kind of hint and pick it up. I don't want this to look cartoony, so I'm not going for a major outline type of an effect. Just want to really kind of give the impression of a plank kind of at first glance. And there are times when, I would go to the trouble of using balsa wood and stuff like that. But this is already made out of wood, and it's really flat. So anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea of how this next step is going to go. You can also use this, this is kind of a flesh tone, light color here, marmalade. You can use that for the same purpose. If you want to try and pick out like a plank edge, you can use it to kind of do that. Make it stand out a little bit. Okay, so pretty convincing at first glance. So we'll be doing this around all the timber areas. So making pretty good progress on the timber planks. So not only am I using the black, I have a kind of a light orange flesh color one that you can also use to help pick up edges and stuff like that. I think that this might actually be a little easier for most people than trying to brush on edge highlights like I was doing. This is not only easier, it's quicker, and it looks fairly decent. So I think that's what I'm going to do for quite a few of these. Just highlight with the pencil. And then the water may be optional. Seems to lighten up the flesh color a little bit too much maybe, so I might just leave that the way it is. Black I'll diffuse a little bit, make it look a little less cartoony, I think. Timber planking is finished up. Hard to say how long it took, probably, I think a little less than an hour. It's moving kind of quick. I think it looks okay. I think at first glance it'll pull off the effect. Ready to start painting stone. I'm going to mask off the timbers that we've already painted. So I was hoping I had some thin masking tape, but I don't. So I took a piece and cut it in half, kind of raggedy. The reason why is the thicker it is, the less likely it wants to bend around a corner or a curve. So by reducing the overall width of this, we can get it to conform a little bit better to that line that we've drawn there. It's going to represent where the stonework starts. So just kind of working it around carefully. Thought I had some graphic tape for this same purpose somewhere, but I don't. No idea where that went. And then it's probably a good idea to double check and make sure that you're lining up in the same place, going off the bottom rather than the seam there, because they don't line up exactly. What am I doing? Right about there then. And then don't forget to mask the sides as well. We don't want to mess up any of the timber work. It's probably good enough. If you're not careful dry brushing, I'll probably go back and do another stripe too, just to keep it all protected. I'll get some wider masking tape for that purpose though. All right, so what I will do now is just go along these again, thicken them up. That way I don't hit my timber work. Go find some new masking tape as well. Okay, components have been masked to protect the woodwork. We've got a Waverly craft paint here, chalk paint. Dries nice and flat. It'll be good to represent the plaster coating that the stone area would have received. Mineral is the name of this one.
little too much paint there. Maybe a 2-coater. I had to water this down a little bit. I think I maybe watered it too much. All right, let that dry down. Go wash out my brush. Come back for another coat. All right, I have 2 coats on plaster stonework. I'm gonna mix a 50/50 Waverly plaster and the mineral color I used earlier. That's way thick. Need to add some water to that. All right, so let's see. Making sure this gets a good coat, a couple different directions. I'll be doing, let's see. All right, I've got 2 coats of the mineral color on the sections now. I have a 50/50 mix of the mineral Waverly and Waverly plaster. So I'll do a dry brush of this. Trying to get a lot of the paint off, the excess paint. And make sure to go a couple different directions. And we'll be doing 2 dry brushes. So the initial base coat. I'm gonna do a coat of this mix, half mix, and then we'll do a coat of the white, just pure plaster color. Making sure to go a couple different directions. Make sure it's irregular. Being careful not to hit any of my timber. So on and so forth. There are 2 layers of paint on the stonework, plasterwork at this point. Layer of mineral by Waverly, chalk paint, and then a 50-50 mix of Waverly and plaster. So letting the brush dry out, washed it out good, letting it dry. Here's what we have so far. These columns are starting to stick out a little bit more. The molding on the top and bottom are starting to stick out a little bit more. And then that'll leave us with a final dry brush of white. That'll pick up edges. Then we can attach the railings, and I'm going to figure out exactly what I want to do up on the editor's box. But overall, looking pretty good. I think this is starting to come together and is going to look pretty sweet. Okay, I think I'm finally down to my last airbrushing sessions. Okay, I think I'm down to my last dry brushing sessions. So this time I'm going to go with pure plaster. Plaster is the name of the color. It's white acrylic paint by Waverly. Pretty thick again. Get most of it off. Make sure the brush is coated really well. And then give it a once over, and this is just to pick up those last couple of edge highlights on the molding there. Maybe a couple little textured items on the interior. It's not going to be a big difference, but it will help. All right, I think that's it for white. I'm also going to show my process for the sand in the back. So that has currently a base coat of burnt umber, apple barrel, and then I'm going to use spice brown for the first dry brush. Actually, masking was covering a little bit of sand, so get off me. I'm not going to work super hard to get underneath these stairs. It's not very accessible. It's kind of hard to paint, actually. First time I was in that region. If I was thinking, I would have probably not made that as textured right there. Right where the stairs start, that would have been a worn down area, but too late now. Pick up a little of the texture on the inside there. Pretty dark, good place for rats to hide. All right, so that would be layer 1, and then layer 2 would be toffee brown. This is the out of print color I've been lamenting throughout these videos. Throughout both of the videos, actually. I'm gonna go ahead and use it. That's what it's made for. So I'm just gonna give it another coat. This is the way I do almost anything with kind of a dirt and grass texture. It's a combination of these colors. So that's that. Then might do a little bit of Bambi brown. This is a final. Pick up a couple more grains, final texture. Get a little bit down in there. Oh, yeah. So that'll be the dirt, and then I'll let that dry fully, and then I'll do static grass. But this is kind of what I was going for, kind of what I planned on doing in the outset, a timber structure with a stone facing. I think that'll look pretty sweet. I may come back and differentiate that a little bit, but I don't know. It's actually probably pretty good. What the heck? There we go. Got a little over dry brushing in this spot. Somehow managed to work its way down in there. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and do is draw a frame on this door using the colored pencils. Rectangular motif. I'm going to try and guide the color down into the center section of the door. So I'm kind of feathering it in towards the center. Again, using kind of a thin craft paint. Try not to make it too contrasty because sometimes acrylic paint, craft paint, miniature paint doesn't tend to do this, but a lot of other acrylic and craft paints tend to dry a slightly different shade than how you apply them. Usually going a little bit darker, I think, but sometimes they go lighter too. It's hard to know if this is showing up in video, but it should be kind of a slight 3D effect at this point. I'll kind of hint at some grains, maybe. Wood grain, planks or something. I'll reinforce the bottom edge where light would probably be hitting that a little more forcefully. One of the last things to do is paint some decorative designs, geometric designs on the sides of the arena walls. I designed some patterns in Illustrator, and these are, the panels are 3 different widths. This is different than that, And so what I did was try to kind of come up with a visual approximation of the spacing, being mindful of the seams. And I'm gonna have to compromise a little bit. The squares on this section are gonna be a little thinner. I tried arranging 2, I tried spacing, making them wider and things like that, and it just didn't look right. I think this, although this isn't spaced exactly right, I think it will still look pretty good, since you probably won't necessarily see them all together at the same time anyway. So what I'm gonna do, I think, on this is get an X-Acto knife, and I am going to cut out these, the full rectangle, and then I'm gonna slice out the white. So I'll take this piece, put it in position, and then trace the white, do the same thing on the other side, and then do that for all of them. And then I'm going to cut the outside of the black and then trace that. And that should give me the inside and outside of the black rectangle. Cut the interior of the red, trace them all again, and then do the exterior of the red. So one could probably just print this out and glue it directly on there. I'm not going to do that though. I'm gonna paint it on. We'll try it. Never done this before. See how it goes. All right, so I'm gonna cut these rectangles out. It's a self-healing mat cutting surface. Probably use the scissors for these, but I'm just gonna continue. I'm gonna try to make these files available online so that if you want to try printing these out yourself, you can. So the idea is that this will be painted like so in this section. This will be painted like so in this section. And that leaves this for all three of these. Then might be worth mentioning that, let's see, this is, just gonna make a little mark because this one is designed a little differently. It's got a thicker rectangle section than this one because I thought the transition was a little too great between this one and this one, and so I thinned this one out and kind of spaced them so they look a little bit better visually. So what we'll have to do is put this one here, and then on this section mirror image it, or flip it rather, and trace that way. So this is a proof of concept. So what I'm about to do is not going to be particularly easy and may not be the best method for you and how you want to approach this. It might be easier for some people just to glue these directly on to the panel. You could cut out the red and glue it in. I think that would actually look pretty good. I'm gonna try and paint them though. So this I'm gonna go ahead and slice out the white interior. Centered up on there good. If you had a really thin drafting pencil, like a 0.3 or something, that would be even better for this. So that's the interior.
I'm going with red and black because the book I was reading about the London Amphitheatre suggested that there was plaster remnants found in the arena area that had black and red on them with the unknown pattern. They didn't really know what the pattern was, so I just went with this one because I see a lot of the shields in the mosaics have like rectangles in them. I thought it would look good. Now, one could probably glue those in place without painting it and call it good. But I'm gonna center that up nicely. That'll be our black squares, rectangles. Then we're gonna skip an area for the whites. Got off track. Come the other way. Started cutting the outside, got ahead of myself. That was not going to be pretty, and it was going to require some touch-up, I think, when I trace it. Then you do want to support this, so like notice when I start the cut, I immediately push up, push down so it doesn't tear, just in case. It's cardstock, which I was regretting initially, but now I'm glad I used cardstock. And being careful to support it to make sure it doesn't rip. Probably going to change the blade between each of these panels too.
All right, once you have the panels drawn out, you go ahead to the painting process. I'm going to do the exterior ones first. Exterior. Start with the exterior rectangle. I grabbed GW Games Workshop Mephiston Red. I think that one kind of looks like the red that you see in the murals, like in Herculaneum and stuff like that. Pompeii. I'm just going to paint in between my guidelines that I've drawn. Oops. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I just want to test this out and see how it's going to look. A bit of water. Normally my face would be down in this, so I could see it a little bit better, but for this video that would be in the way. A little too watery. Okay, so before you do any touch-ups on the red and the black, it's probably a good idea to wash off any of the watercolor pencil that's still on there. So you can see that's going to break down with water, and the acrylic paint is not going to break down with water. So I've got a little Q-tip here. I'm just pulling off that pigment. If it gets kind of dark and cloudy, you can give it another shot. So watercolor has a gum arabic binder typically. That's what keeps the pigments together, and that's water soluble. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and now that I've got the black and red done, go through, wash off any of that watercolor pencil that is still lingering down there. What the heck is that? I'll let that dry, and then I'll go back and mix up a plaster color that kind of matches this white and gray, and touch them up a little bit. All right, so I have the panels painted in, red and black. A little rough if you spend too much time looking at them, but overall I think that they carry off the effect pretty well. I was looking for. All right. All right, got a sheet of cardstock here, red, and the top of the pavilion canopy shade area for the magistrate. I'm going to trace this and design a fold. Fold over, so pre-score this so it folds a little easier. I'm going to use the back of the X-Acto blade. It needs to fold here, there. I think I have one of those little ball scorers somewhere, but I don't quite know where it is, so I have to make do with this. Again, using the back so I can fold these tabs in so they won't get in the way, and maybe you can use those to glue. Basically, I'm creating a shallow box out of paper that we can hopefully drop right on the top of this thing. And so that will end up sitting there. Right along there. And there. As you can see, I just kind of winged it. Should have probably measured. Other ones are pretty good. Put that side at the back. All right. Again, not using a whole lot of glue. Okay, what I have here is a printout of some things I want to add to this. One is a small image of a tapestry depicting the Emperor Vespasian. It's not Roman by any means, but it looks good enough for me. There's really no Roman tapestries. There's fragments, I think, but nothing like that. So I grabbed a Flemish tapestry of the Emperor Vespasian from probably the 17 or 1800s. Put a new border on it, though. The border I had on it was Rococo or Baroque or something, so did not have the fit. So this one, to me, looks similar to, I think, the mural depicting the Battle of Gaugamela, I don't know how to pronounce it, that's in Pompeii of Alexander the Great. And this one kind of has a similar kind of panoramic view to that one. So that's why I went with that. I also was going to use just a piece of cardstock for the for this here, this seat area, but I think instead what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on there and see how that looks. And if that doesn't look good, I will, I'm probably going to trim this and face it like a fringe, and we'll see how that looks. So carefully slice this out. So that will be there behind the editor. Try this first. Might not even fit, looks a little wide. Something like that. Actually didn't look too bad. May just go with that. Got some white glue here. Could also use Mod Podge. I like Mod Podge actually. I'd probably use that, but I don't seem to have any. So I'm gonna try and give this an even coat, and we're gonna put it on there before it has too much of a chance to warp. Not sure where I got the idea to do a tapestry. I think I maybe saw one in a painting or something. I mean, Poliso Verso or one of those. Anyway, I think that looks pretty cool. All right, and then we'll do the same with this. My airbrush is acting up, so I'm hand painting the canopy just to give it a little extra punch. Looking pretty flat. So I just dry brush the top of it with a big mop brush. Just paint in a couple lines to kind of emphasize the pull of the fabric over some corners or supports or something. A little Vallejo Scarlet for this. Sorry if my hat brim is in your way. I'm not paying attention. Just kind of help these pop a little bit more. All right, I think that'll do for that. And again, if we hate it, we can remove it. Fits pretty snug. Last but not least, use some Elmer's glue, some static grass. This is Games Workshop static grass I've had for quite a long time. You can see I use just about anything for a palette. And some mixture of kind of flock and static grass and stuff like that. It's kind of dull. I'm gonna use that for areas where there might be some dead grass and stuff like that. Anyway, this is my method for terrain that has dirt and grass and stuff. A little bit of glue. Grab an old ratty brush that you don't care too much about. So I'll put some kind of dead colors kind of underneath the stairs where not a lot of sunlight. little bit in the corner. Subtle, but it'll work. So that would be step one. That's pretty much it.